This is the oldest house, the headquarters of the Federal Bureau of Control, responsible for studying, containing, and controlling supernatural phenomena. As Jessy Faden enters the oldest house, looking for her brother, she's greeted by hostile security personnel. We soon find out that they're affected by something referred to as the Hiss, which is somehow controlling their minds. Let's try to figure out what the Hiss is. How does it control the minds of the Bureau employees? And how does it spread? And why does Jessy seem to be the only one unaffected by it? Hopefully we'll find answers to these questions, and maybe what we learn about the Hiss can be used to save people rather than turn them into zombies. The Hiss is described with the term resonance. Once affected by this resonance, one either becomes aggressive towards any living non-affected being or completely passive, aside from endlessly mumbling some incantations. In the former case, one seemed to retain all abilities and skills possessed before being affected. Regardless of state, everyone affected seemed to help spread this resonance. There seems to be only one reliable way to protect yourself against the Hiss: wearing Hedron resonance amplifier devices that amplify another resonant signal that counteracts the effect of the Hiss resonance. So we're apparently dealing with resonance here. Resonance occurs when a periodic force is applied with a frequency close to the natural frequency of the system upon which the force acts. This results in the system oscillating with a higher amplitude than any non-resonant frequencies of applied force would allow. Now, resonance can occur in many different types of systems. It could be electrical resonance, thermal resonance, mechanical resonance, and so on. So we need to figure out what type of resonance we're dealing with. Based on the assumption that the ones affected by the Hiss are also spreading it, the force that propagates this resonance must be possible for humans to create. The neurons in the human body communicate with electrical signals, but these signals are far too weak to propagate any electromagnetic field that could significantly affect other humans. So electrical resonance is out. Thermal energy is created by humans and is in fact to some extent periodic, with a frequency depending on the heart rate. Now, any small temperature variation would diffuse quickly outside the body, but the resulting difference in radiated infrared light would be interceptable from quite far away. But the intensity would be very low, and any standard aluminized fire proximity suit would efficiently block this out. So it wouldn't explain the need for the Hedron resonance amplifiers. I think we're dealing with mechanical resonance, or sound to be more specific. As far as I can tell, this has the best fit. It can be produced by humans with relatively high output power. It has good reach, not limited to line of sight, and can pass through certain objects and so on. And it's prone to cause resonance in our surroundings. And it kind of makes sense if we assume that these incantations play a part in spreading it. At first it would seem quite easy to shield yourself from sound. A pair of state-of-the-art earmuffs should do the trick, but I think it's a bit more complicated. But we'll get back to that. So this brings us to the main question: can you control people with sound? We should clarify that we're not talking about mutually agreed upon execution of verbally communicated instructions. The premise is that we will have to be able to completely remove the freedom of choice from the receiving party, effectively hijacking the brain, as that is how the Hiss seems to operate. To find the answer to this question, we'll look to nature. Hijacking the central nervous system of living creatures is not exactly uncommon in the animal kingdom. The most well-known example is probably the fungus that affects ants, making them aggressive towards their peers and ultimately causes them to climb to a specific altitude to die as the fungus grows out of them, releasing its spores. Exactly how this fungus controls the ants is still not completely certain, but there seems to be no theories involving the use of sound, so we'll have to look elsewhere. What we're looking for can be found in a certain type of nematode worm, called this name. This worm detects vibrations with the help of a certain protein called TRP4, which responds to vibrations in the ultrasound range. Through genetic manipulation, it's possible to choose in which neurons this protein will be present, thus deciding which areas of the central nervous system that should be affected by ultrasound. This technique to manipulate the central nervous system using sound is called sonogenetics. By using a different protein with similar properties, this technique has been demonstrated to work in mice as well. As mice are mammals, it seems quite likely that sonogenetics would work on humans as well. Now, this tells us that controlling brain cells with sound is technically possible, if your brain was genetically modified to contain sound-sensitive protein. As far as we know, the employees at the Bureau are regular people. Why are they affected? Well, the answer is probably quite simple. They all have an infection. If given the correct instructions, the human body can produce this protein by itself and even place it in the desired neurons in the brain. So, what the His needs is a way to deliver the necessary genetic code to the humans in the Bureau. And that is exactly what a virus does. It enters the human body, inserts the code into affected cells, which then executes this code. Viruses also tend to be quite efficient at spreading. Let's refer to it as the His virus. So the ultimate goal of the His is a bit unclear, but it is quite obvious that it wants to take over the entire Bureau, and possibly the rest of the world as well, if allowed to escape the oldest house. So why does it rely on audio-induced resonance to activate the mind control? Why doesn't this virus just turn people into zombies immediately? Well, that is the clever part. This way, the virus could spread in secret, completely undisturbed, as it appears to be completely asymptomatic until activated. Then, when every single employee is infected, the His resonance activates the mind control like the flick of a switch and spreads quite literally with the speed of sound. This makes it practically impossible to contain once activated. Now, the origin of this virus is uncertain, but I would argue that we are presented with at least a few quite possible sources. But for the sake of not spoiling the opportunity for you to experience the mysteries of the oldest house yourself, if you haven't done so already, I will leave it up to you to speculate. So again, why can't you just wear earmuffs? Well, the resonance is not affecting our minds through our ears, it's affecting our brains directly. You would have to be completely immersed in earmuffs for them to protect you. So, wearing the Hedron resonance amplifiers seems to be the only way to keep the His resonance from affecting you. So, what do they do? Judging by the name, they're amplifying another resonant audio signal that somehow counteracts the effect of the His resonance. My guess is that the lead researcher, Dr. Darling, figured out that the employees of the Bureau had been affected by a virus. By analyzing the genetic code of this virus, he managed to figure out its effect on the human body before it was activated by the His resonance. And apparently also managed to find flaws in its design, which open up the possibility to disrupt or counteract its effect with another audio signal. So everyone without a Hedron resonance amplifier seemed to be affected by the His, except Jessy herself. Why is she immune to the His? Well, the answer to that is debatable, but we now know that in order for the His to manifest, one needs to be infected by the His virus. And since Jessy enters the oldest house for the first time after the His outbreak, it's likely that she's simply not infected, and therefore not affected by the resonance. Now, it's quite clear that this is a powerful technology, and we're witnessing it being used to turn people into zombies. But could this same technology be used for more constructive purposes as well? By modifying the His virus, carrying the genetic code for producing sound-sensitive proteins in neurons, it should be possible to decide in what part of the brain these proteins should be present. This would give us the ability to activate parts of the brain with external stimulus. And this could be used to treat neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and epilepsy by actively reactivating the affected parts of the brain. Now, interestingly enough, practical use of this technology might not be that far away. There's a closely related technology called Optogenetics that works in a very similar way, but instead of manipulating neurons with sound, it uses light. And optogenetics has already been used on a human to cure blindness. Partially. The patient suffered from retinitis pigmentosa, which is a neurodegenerative eye disease that affects the photoreceptors and could only distinguish differences in light intensity. The patient's eye was injected with a virus carrying the genetic code for producing light-sensitive proteins in the ganglion cells, the cells responsible for interpreting the information from other retinal neurons and convey it to the brain. Using specially engineered goggles that used light to reactivate these cells, the patient was able to perceive and locate individual objects. Now, the problem with this technology is that it will be complicated to reach a specific part of the brain with a light source. One would need a pretty strong flashlight to be able to penetrate the skull of a human. So, in most cases, brain surgery will be necessary. Sonogenetics, on the other hand, does not have this problem. With sound, you can reach the brain through the skull without causing as much as a scratch. Sonogenetics can no doubt be a powerful tool, but it could also be a powerful weapon. Once you've managed to infect someone with a His virus, you have essentially installed a backdoor into their brain, without them even knowing it. A backdoor that you might be able to activate with something as simple as a small wireless speaker. Now, could you imagine the impact this could have if everyone walked around with a small speaker at all time? On second thought, what if you're being controlled right now?